building a portfolio management. I have some experience building an NFT marketplace or whatever, other challenges that they have. So it's a learning process, really, for me as well. So I mean, I learned a ton in the last challenge that I just kind of uncovered while doing it.
But how many have you done now? Was it your first one you participated?
Yeah, it was my first one. Degenfi was my first ever, and I mean, I've played around with Scrypto before, so I had like some familiarity about it. It was a little bit different when I did the lending challenge because the way they did like badges. So my first exposure in Scrypto was like when it was first released back in December last year. And the way the badges work has completely changed ever since I touched it. So I had to like relearn a bunch of different things. I also didn't really know Rust all that well. I mean, I learned it a little bit last year, but like, I stopped using it. So like I had to relearn how the syntax works and like how like the ownership stuff works, because I had a bunch of like move borrowed value like errors. And like, yeah, it was it was I would say half of that challenge was mainly like me relearning Rust and Scrypto.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine with the release of fees that it's going to change up a lot of things as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, uh, personally, I mean, everyone learns it differently. So I'm always kind of hesitant to kind of like give pointers or anything like that, because everyone does learn it differently, and the way you approach, there's like, multiple answers to a problem. Like the way I did my design for Degenfi would probably be different if another person did it. And there are some ways to do it that is more elegant than others, but at the end of the day, as long as it does what you're expecting it to do, then, I think that's fine. But with regards to fees, yeah, I'm sure there's going to be some changes for sure, because like, you don't know how much compute your solution is going to have. It might be more expensive or less expensive, but personally, I wouldn't really like focus on that too much. It's just uh, getting your idea out there and then iterating afterwards, because there's so many things that you have to keep track of, and it gets really complicated and like just so confusing once if you like think about everything all at once. And so like you get into like analysis paralysis, and that's kind of like part of the issue that I dealt with when I built Degenfi. Like things got really complicated real quick, and I'm just like, what do I do? Like there's so much to do, and sometimes it's just better to like put it out there and then like fix it like as you go along.
Yeah, I'm not anywhere near trying to optimize anything. I'm just trying to, I think Nelly, this is the same. I think we're just trying to make things work.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly how you should go about it. Because like that's like also sort of like a brain hack too, like once you get into a stage where you can actually start testing it, even though it's a little bit janky here and there, like it's really rewarding. Like, oh shit, like this works. Like that's pretty cool. And then as you keep testing, you'll be like, oh, you know what, this works here, but then I can imagine that if I optimize it here a little bit, like it's going to work a lot better. Or like you start thinking about like, oh, how does the user use this? Like, is this easy for them? Is this hard for them? And you start like iterating over that. But like, yeah, I think the first step is just to get something working, even if it's like super janky. But anyways,
I think the first time it took me like 3 hours to just get it compiled.
yeah, no, I mean you'll get get through that. Like quickly. Just, as long as you can just, it's perseverance, right? Just keep going at it. Well, I can go over. I don't know what kind of format you guys want to do this as. I'm pretty flexible, so if you want me to kind of start from the beginning and just go over it and walk you through how I thought about things, how I design things, or if you have any questions, and we can just free ball it, however you want to go.
Yeah, really, I'm open to hear any of your thoughts, man. If you want to, I can go through it on my screen, or you can share your screen and kind of use your cursor to point around at what you're talking about. And I've had time to go through. Let's see, the majority of your RS files. I hadn't really gone through the loan auctions or the Oracle or the collateral pull, but I was just trying to figure out, because when I started looking at your code, my main concern was looking for how you were basically your user management RS file, just to see, and I found out that you're using soulbound tokens to basically record everything, I think.
Yep, exactly, yeah. Maybe what I can do is just contextualize how everything is put together so that it's less confusing for you and just easier for you to navigate and kind of piece together what works with what, and that I'm sure will help you kind of dig in a little bit better, because now you have context of the pieces that fits together. Does this sound good to you?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Cool. Yeah. So I have my screen open here, and I don't know if both of you guys are looking at it.
Yeah, I got you up.
Cool. So just real quickly these are essentially the basic features of the lending protocol that I've added. Most of these features you can and I'll go over the structure of the blueprints, but most of these features you can find in the Degenfi RS file. And the way you would consider the Degenfi RS file would kind of just be the main dashboard, and it connects through everything else of the other blueprints. If you had to look at just one blueprint, the Degenfi blueprint is probably the best place to start at. Of course, how you do the calculation and all that sort of thing is through the other blueprints, but I'll get to that in a little bit. But so these are the basic features. You can create a user, and as you mentioned, Austin, I am using SBT tokens to track user information, essentially, how much balance they have, how many loans they're doing. When I first designed this protocol, I had a lot of back and forth of how I should do this. I was talking to Florian. He said to just use fungible tokens, but intuitively I thought non-fungible tokens was more appropriate for this type of protocol, because you do have data that you need to record, right? A person's loan balance, a person's I guess how long they've had the loan, their collateral, et cetera, et cetera. So these are important information that needs to be recorded somehow, some way. And I guess technically you can do it with fungibles. It's just it makes things difficult, because then from a user's perspective, if you're calculating their interest rates through fungibles, or recording loans through fungible, then in their wallet they have just a bunch of fungible tokens, and they gotta sort through it and be oh yeah, this is which tokens I need to keep track of. And it's just, I think that just makes it complicated. So I went with SBT on NFTs basically, and that's how I arrived at. I feel that's a pretty elegant solution. I talked about it with Omar, and he said he thinks that NFT is probably a good way to go about it. And so those are the type of questions you'll probably come across as you build your portfolio management protocol as well for the challenge. Is like, oh, how should I design this? Like, I guess like for the portfolio, like for the manager or whatever, like should the manager be a fungible token? Should it be like an NFT? What about the user? Should it be a fungible or NFT? Like these are just some design questions that you come across as you build your own protocol, and like because the asset oriented approach is pretty new in a space, some of those questions probably don't have a right answer per se, and you kind of just have to like play around with it as you go, and maybe down the line you'll realize, oh, it's actually better to do it this way. And
Yeah, so storing, I don't even understand how you do what you're doing with fungible tokens. Like, if you're updating metadata and you're not in your fungible token, wouldn't it update everyone else's fungible metadata at the same time? So you'd either have your fungible tokens would either have everyone's transaction in that one fungible token, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you were to
That's
use
wild to
fungible
me.
token.
Yes, I completely, after going through your code, I've learned. I just gotta say thanks because I've learned a lot going through your stuff. It seems like when you're making the authorization badges for the component to actually be able to manipulate the individual user's soulbound token, that it's a good thing to make it fungible, just because you only really need one of them. So like badges like that, I understand, but like if you're recording stuff, I think your approach of non fungible is a lot better.
Yeah, and like there will be like other types of design questions that you'll have, as well as as you kind of start building more complex blueprints. Um, Authorization is also like a pretty tricky one sometimes, but yeah, totally. Yeah, I think you have like the right approach to all of this. So hopefully that was like helpful, like kind of tangent to like give you an idea of like what I was thinking as I was building this. Not all of I'm sure, I'm pretty sure like that not all of the designs I have here are like the best way to build it. I'm sure there's someone more creative or better at like developing than I am down the line that will be like, you know what, like it's actually better to do it this way or etc. Like this is just my best like guess of like how a lending protocol would work, but it's open to interpretations for sure. So
I got a
Have
question
you
already.
received any? Sorry.
sure, yeah, no, go ahead.
Go ahead, Nelly.
I was just wondering if you have received any kind of feedback by either, yeah, whatever, Omar or Florian or somebody, like, this is good, this is bad, or maybe next time think about this or that, or was it just like you send it in and, yeah, you have the third place and
Yeah.
that's it?
The feedback that I got from Clement was the one that was reviewing my code base.
Okay.
The only one that like the only feedback that he provided was mainly the SPT, and I'll go ahead and show you this real quickly. Is in the user management, and I'll open up Degenfi just to kind of give you an idea how things are kind of like looped in. So as I mentioned before, Degenfi is kind of like your main dashboard, is probably the first impression of the lending protocol. One of the methods I created here is the new user method, as you can see here. What it what you do is you would pass in your component address. So you know how every account in Scrypto is a component.
Yeah.
So you would pass in the component address. And my first thinking about this was that if if I just, how do I prevent someone from simply creating multiple badges, right? Like ideally, one user should only have one SBT, because you could think of SBT as sort of like your credit report. It evaluates your total credit worthiness as a borrower. And if you have multiple of them, it kind of gets really confusing. It's weird. So ideally, you should only have one. So I thought, like, maybe if you have them enter the component address, maybe this would be like a way to um, guarantee that one person only gets one SBT, because in my user management, when you, as you can see here, there's also like another like new user method. So this is the user management blueprint. This is the Degenfi blueprint. What it does is that it routes through the user management component right here. So it's a cross blueprint call basically. I don't know if you guys have started like playing around with that concept of like doing cross blueprint, but that's what it's doing behind the scene. It's just routing through the user management blueprint, and this is the actual logic behind it. And so you're creating a user SBT here, and it's being recorded right here, and as well as right here. So this is the component address, and what I did was I created a vector right here, account record. It's a vector of all the user's component address. And what it is if the same user were to create another SBT, I think it provides a warning, or maybe it doesn't. Does it provide a warning?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it does. I think I read
Yeah, I'm
that.
also sure I've seen it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the SBT already created for this account. So then they would assert like, oh, make sure that there's no record of this component address. And so I thought, like, I was like, yeah, you know what? This seems to make sense. Like, this should be how you do it, probably. It's not very asset oriented, because, asset oriented would be like you're using badges as a way to like validate users. But here I'm using component address. And Clement said that this is actually useless to do, because what prevents someone from creating another wallet and using that wallet to create multiple users? And what prevents some people can also enter a component that's not an account. It could be like a totally like another protocol, and that's you get into really tricky situations when you do it like this way. However, he did also mention that like the kind of stuff that you need to make sure that one user has one badge is an on-chain KYC. So, quite frankly, like it's just not supported yet. So overall, this is a pretty bad way to design it. But there's at the moment not really like, I don't think there's really a solution for this until you have on-chain KYC. So that was the feedback that he provided to me from Clement. But yeah, I guess moving forward.
Hold on one second. What is the point of doing the cross component call? Like, I didn't even realize you were doing that inside Degenfi. I was trying to set up something similar. And why wouldn't you just call it straight from the user management component?
Well, the reason why you do the reason why you even have multiple blueprints is to try to modularize the logic of your protocol. And like, as you can see, if you like look through all of these different blueprints, like there's probably like 5,000 lines of codes, and they're all doing different things, and it can get pretty confusing if you have just one blueprint of everything just thrown in there. So the lending pool, like it does things specifically just for the lending pool, right? And the collateral pool does stuff specifically just for the collateral pool. There are some similarities that you do with collateral between the collateral pool and the lending pool. So, for example, you can deposit in the lending pool, but you can also deposit in the collateral pool. So the logic for that is pretty much the same. I guess the only difference with the collateral pool is that you can, I believe you can liquidate. Let me see. Yeah, you can liquidate from the collateral pool, but obviously you can't do that for the lending pool. There's no logic for that in the lending pool. So it's just to separate things, and it also incentivizes or encourages composability between components as well. Because what if some other protocol out there wants to use the lending pool in this protocol? They want to, maybe you have like a yield aggregator type of component, and you want to use the money in that yield aggregator to supply liquidity and earn APY, right? So then they can hook up to this lending pool.
Okay, so let me see if I can articulate this. So the
Sure.
reason why you have all of these different RS files, I could see a few reasons. One, like you're saying, like say if your lending pool is generic enough, someone could reuse it, or like you're saying, could connect directly to it to use your specific lending pool. And then also, if you're trying to go back and like change your code down the road, you would be able to just basically manipulate the lending RS that would then connect back to the Degenfi RS, and you wouldn't really have to do much, if anything, inside the Degenfi RS file.
Yeah, it's better for testing as well. I guess that's kind of your point as well. Like it's better for testing because you can isolate. Like if let's say we have all of these files just in one blueprint, and something goes wrong in that blueprint. Like it's gonna be just one gigantic like code base, and it's just like which one goes where, and like it's hard to identify where the problem is. So like if there was something that was wrong in my lending pool, for example, as I was using like the whole thing, if I'm like in Degenfi and I'm like trying to test out my stuff here, and then there's something wrong in the lending pool actually, if you take a look here, I created like little, let me see if I can find one. Yeah, here we go. Info. Yeah. So there are like these little things that I create in the lending pool, and it will say something like lending pool. And so like if there's something wrong when I'm testing, if there's something wrong in the lending pool blueprint when I'm testing my entire like package, I guess, there it will admit that like info lending pool, something is wrong in the lending pool blueprint component. So I can kind of like pretty much it's easier for me to
Yeah,
diagnose.
you could go directly to the lending pool and figure out the problem is instead of the entire group of code, right? So
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's the idea behind it. It also separates like the authorization as well, and I think it's just better for organization too. I guess it also becomes a little bit tricky because when I first built the user management component, for instance, I didn't realize this until a little bit later on. But as you can kind of see here, so let's say we go to the deposit increase, what is it, collateral balance, collateral, collateral. Okay. So let's say we have this method right here. add collateral balance. The add collateral balance, as you can imagine, adds collateral for the user. And to contextualize this, you need collateral to borrow money, right? And the higher your collateral is, the more money you can borrow. But I didn't realize this later on, but like, what stops anyone from simply going to the user management component and simply making this call? Because all they need to know is just their non-fungible ID, which everyone has access to, the resource address of their NFT ID, which everyone has access to, and the amount. Like, they can just call this method and just continue to add collateral balance to their account. Like, that would not work in a real life scenario, right? Like, you don't want users to just go in here and like mess around with their own SBTs. Obviously, like, I learned later on that like you can have access controls. Like, you can't, no one can just simply go into this component and like change whatever they want. They need an access badge, which only the component has. Users don't get this access badge. So, I mean, this is I guess like a simple problem, I suppose. But as you add more and more complexity to your authorization model, like, it gets kind of confusing, like who should own which badge and what kind of authorization should they have, and it gets pretty convoluted. But that's like a simple problem I came across when I built multiple blueprints, is that like, how do I prevent people from just simply like changing their balance or what have you.
That, I think, correct me if I'm wrong. I hadn't done anything but read the Scrypto 0.5 announcement, but it seems like this is going to be solved with the owned components.
Yeah, totally.
Thing as well. Like, I don't know. I haven't dived deep enough to understand that if you still need that authorization badge on the component that owns another, but I assume it means that you could have your user management component instantiated from the Degenfi component, so only the Degenfi component would be able to call methods from it, like, I don't know, natively, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think you have the right intuition. I mean, I haven't dug in that deeply yet either, and I think that's probably how it works, which simplifies a lot of different things. Because yeah, like the author, I mean, it's a lot more flexible than Solidity, but yeah, you also have like a lot of things that you got to keep track of in terms of like having like access rules between each components. But yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, so what else? I mean, Nelly, you've been a little bit quiet. Are you following along? Am I like explaining things like well enough?
Yeah, definitely. I've already taken some notes because I definitely need to recheck something in my code.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm like, I'm doing a good job.
I can follow. That's all fine.
Okay, sounds great. So I guess we can also go over like the use of transient tokens as well. That's pretty much the bread and butter of this protocol, is using transient tokens. And I use transient tokens in a way where you can do folded leverage. Are you guys familiar with what folded leverage is?
Not really, no.
I assume it means you just keep borrowing and depositing that as collateral, so you're increasing your leverage every time you do that transaction.
Yeah, that's essentially the basis of it. So Nelly, are you familiar with flash loans? Like how they work?
Yeah, a little bit, yes.
Yeah. So in Scrypto, flash loans are much simpler to perform, simply because you have these transient tokens, and as the name infers, they're transient, they're temporary. If they can't be deposited, only burnt. So you can have some kind of metadata in that transient token that says perhaps like how much money you owe, and if that money you owe isn't paid back, then this transient token can't be burnt. And so, taking an abstraction from that, like you can now just have multiple transactions that you want to do all together. And at the end of the transaction, when all the rules are met, the preconditions are met, the transient token burns in the transaction is submitted all at once. So hopefully that makes sense a little bit. Yeah, sometimes for me, when I first like learned about it, like it was kind of hard to wrap my head around. So it took a while to kind of.
Yeah, I think that's also one of the challenges I have. I mean, it's not just about learning Scrypto. Yeah, I mean, you also need to learn this finance stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it is a lot to learn, and I mean, to me, it was fun just simply learning about it. And what helps a lot is like I was reading a lot of like the Aave documentation and Abracadabra, like a few other lending protocols, how things work there. And obviously, you kind of have to translate it a little bit because they're not asset oriented. So you got to be like, oh, this is how it works here. But then, like on Scrypto, because you have NFTs, because you have SBTs, you can do it this way. But it's the same idea that you're trying to solve. So, what a flash loan is essentially when you are borrowing money from a lending protocol, you gotta deposit collateral, and that's pretty much how much that pretty much determines how much money you can borrow from the protocol, right? If it's like a 75% LTV, a loan to value, you can only borrow up to 75% of the value of your collateral. You have $1,000 US, you can only borrow $750. So what folded leverage allows you to do is essentially take that collateral and actually, you take that collateral and you borrow against it, and the proceeds that you have from that borrowed money, you would just deposit it back again, and now you have more collateral, and you take that more collateral and then you do it all over again. Basically, it's very like, I mean, that's why I call this like protocol Degenfi, is because it's very degen, like it's like you're doing all this leverage and it's extremely risky actually. So that's kind of the basic idea of it. It's a little bit hard to like wrap my head around still, but that's, I mean, I provide like a lot of, I guess, explanation here. So if that like explanation doesn't make sense, hopefully the deep dive here is more like easier to process.
Can you go back to the scroll up just a little bit? Can you kind of show like where the transient tokens would come into play on your example here? If you have 1,000 XRD and
Yes, the transient token would exist here. So let me see if I can pull up the.
You can do that flash loan without collateral, though, right? Because the flash loan, since it's all in one transaction, doesn't require collateral.
That's right. Yeah, you don't have to do it.
So the transient tokens you're given as basically a receipt for taking the flash loan, and those transient tokens have to be burnt by the end of the transaction, or the whole transaction fails. That's kind of like how it's securing that you're not just taking a flash loan and running, right?
Yes, exactly. There's no way that you can just take the money and run with it, because like, let's say you take the money and then you just like deposit it to your account, like in the transient token itself. And let me see if I can like better explain this through like showing the code itself. Let me see. Flash borrow. Let me see here. So yeah, here is where the transient token is minted when you borrow. You have, this is the actual method to do a flash loan borrow. It accepts two arguments. One is the token that you want to borrow and the amount of that token. So if you want to borrow, 1,000 USD, you would put the variable or the resource address for USD and then the amount, and it mints this transient token right here. And the transient token has these three metadata. This one, honestly, you can kind of ignore it. I was trying to do something interesting with that, but I didn't have time to. But these are really the two metadata that you want to pay attention to. This records how much that is due or owed, and this is the actual USD. This is the actual like resource address of the token. So it mints that when you do a flash loan borrow, and again, like if you do a flash loan borrow, you can borrow whatever amount you want, but you need to burn this somehow, because let me see if I can show you. Where is the flash loan address? Here, this flag, it says that you can't deposit it. It can only be burned. So how can you burn this? You would call the flash, what is it called again? Flash deposit, repay. There we go. So this is the only way you can burn it, is if you call this method right here, flash repay, because this method has the authorization right here to burn the flash loan. Are you guys following along with that? Just this
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So this method is the only method that has the authorization to burn the flash loan. If this method isn't called, the transaction will simply fail. But what does this method do? It asserts that you have, well, okay, the method requires you to pass in two arguments. One is the amount that you have to repay, and the other is the flash loan itself. And so this method has three checks. The first check is to make sure that the amount that you passed in has to be greater or equal to the amount that's due, which is one of the metadata that's recorded in the transient token, if you remember. If not, then it will tell you that, hey, like you don't have enough money to pay back your flash loan. The other check is to make sure that you actually passed in the flash loan itself. Maybe it's empty. Maybe you passed in some other like token that I don't even know. So this is another check. It makes sure that like the transient token that you pass in is actually the transient token that belongs to this protocol, because some other person might like have another component and they might have a transient token themselves that like they're trying to do some nefarious things and pass in the wrong transient token. So this check right here makes sure that the transient token actually belongs to this protocol. And once all of these are, once all of this has been checked and things are good, then it essentially just burns the flash loan. It takes the repay amount, it puts it back to the lending pool, the flash loan is burnt, and the transaction is successful. So going back to that, in the folded leverage, you really only need the transient token to be able to do this. And And yeah, hopefully, does that help?
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely. I have a couple questions I can think of. Your transient token, is it basically just like a transient soulbound token? It's going to be a non-fungible, and are you using like a single token to represent that flash loan?
Yes. The the naming of the tokens, like the transit token, the soulbound token, maybe it's easier for you to like wrap your head around if you like think of it that way. Sure. Yeah, I guess it is like a form of soulbound token
I just
because
meant like it's a non-fungible that you're not really
yeah,
doing anything with except for burning it because you can't deposit
exactly.
it. I guess it's not
Yeah.
soulbound because you can't deposit it, but
Hmm.
so I'm trying to just think like if I were going through this thought process designing your protocol,
Hmm.
is it would you say it's asset oriented? Is it more asset oriented, do you think, to record the flash loan and everything on your transient non fungible token, or did you consider like making the tokens fungible and like representing the amount of your flash loan with like an amount of that actual token? Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. You can do that. I well, so you can do that in different applications of transitness, I suppose. For this particular example, I don't think you can. Um, but using fungible to make some kind of transient like composable transactions, you can. I don't know in what particular like use case you can do it with. You'll have to like think of that yourself, of what's appropriate and uh, when it's appropriate to use like a transient fungible versus a transient non-fungible. The reason why you can't use transient fungible in this case is because if you go back to the Flash repay, like what if the amount that they repay, like let's say they take out like $1,000 USD, but in the repay amount they put like 1,000 XRD. Um, in this case, uh, let me see. You know what? So as I'm going through, oh, actually, there we go. So in this check right here, I'm making sure that the bucket that's passed uh, is actually the same as the amount, the asset that they borrowed from. So if they're borrowing USD and they're passing in XRD, this wouldn't work because the check says, the assets that you repaid has to be the same, or else it'll say like incorrect asset passed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that's the reason why I have like the non-fungible is because I was able to create another flash borrow. I was able to create another metadata that says the asset they requested to borrow, and it would make sure that whatever that they borrow, they gotta like pay back in that same asset. So I think yeah, but you can use transient fungible. You just I don't know if you I don't think you would, at least at the top of my head, I don't think you could like do it in this case because you do need to check that the asset that they repay has to be the same as well, not just the amount.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking out loud here. I'm not saying anything's better. I'm just thinking of different ways to do things. So
Oh, totally.
I
Yeah,
was
no.
thinking like if you had a protocol like yours and you were
Hmm.
only doing your operations on like a handful of resources like XRD, Bitcoin, USD, maybe you could have like a transient token specifically for each type of resource that you'd be requesting, and then use amounts, so where that
Right.
you'd have a physical resource representing the loan instead of a metadata. Although I don't know, maybe changing metadata is better.
Yeah, I mean, like the way you're thinking about it should be, yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, again, like I recognize that you're just spitballing too. And yeah, no, you can probably use it in different ways. You can probably even like say you would have like maybe a hash map of that transient fungible, and you would associate that transient fungible with a particular resource address, and that would be another way of doing it. I mean, the design space is almost practically unlimited, right? Like there's different ways you can go about it, and yeah, I totally encourage you to like just explore, and even if it doesn't seem intuitive or crazy at first. I mean, when I first did, like before I learned about whatchamacallit, um access rules, the way I prevented people from accessing the user management component was using transient tokens, which was actually, like looking back, it was actually like super complicated to do, as opposed to just simply having like an access rule like this.
Yeah, I can't
Like,
even imagine doing transient tokens for users. I can't wrap my head around that yet.
yeah, it was,
No,
yeah, no, it
neither.
was it was a clusterfuck. It was really like I was like, it's just so super I mean, it worked. It was just super complicated. It probably was super expensive too to do. Like essentially, what it was that the only way that you can like access this like user management like methods was if some kind of call was made from the like from lending pool, for example, and like for example like the deposit method in the lending pool. And so when you deposit something or you borrow something, a transient token is minted, and that transient token gets passed into this blueprint, and this blueprint makes sure that that transient token belongs to the lending pool, and then make sure that like the amount is correct, and like it burns when it's actually successful. And it was it was really complicated. But yeah, thankfully I was able to figure out that you can do access rules. But like it's things like that, right? Like things like that are like you learn a lot even from exploring like that, even if it was a bad idea, right? Like you're like, oh, like I have this really weird way of doing things, and then it was kind of cool, but then later on I figured out that there was actually a simpler way to do it, and you learn a lot from simply doing that too. So
I got a
so yeah,
question about how you started on this project. Did you start with like a Degenfi RS file and you just started compiling all the functions that you thought your component would need, and then you're like, oh wait, I need a user management component, so you'd start that file, and did you have
yeah.
one massive file before you were splitting things up, or did you kind of start with multiple RS files knowing ahead of time that, hey, I want this kind of functionality in its own section?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Let me see if I happen to have. Um, I don't think I have it. When I first started this project, I didn't know how to use GitHub, and it would have been cool to show you because it would have shown you like how the project started from the beginning. But I think those commits were lost. But basically, I started from using the AutoLend component, actually. Um, I just had like literally this, let me see here, Scrypto examples, I think it was in DeFi AutoLend. I literally just had this. Like this was how it was. I added like a few like methods, I think, if I remember correctly. I wanted like a different way of doing flash loans. So instead of them, like you mint the flash loan through this method, but I had my own like similarly to Degenfi flash borrow. Like I had a separate method for flash loan borrows, and I had my own borrow. I had my own, method for borrowing, and here it's combined. The borrow is the same as the flash loan borrow. I think, pretty sure. No. It was in a different file, but anyways, yeah, no, I had this, and I just kind of just continue to add method calls to it. And then like I realized that this way of recording user data wasn't something that was flexible enough for me. Plus, this one doesn't have SPTs. So then I realized, yeah, I think I do need to have like a separate blueprint. But I actually first had my user management blueprint in the same file as the AutoLED blueprint. I only then realized like later on that I had to do like a separate blueprint because things were kind of just getting like too complicated for one file. Yeah.
Awesome. Is that AutoLend? Is that something the team? Is that just like a team's example they put out? I actually hadn't even gone through that one yet.
Yeah, this is from the Scrypto example. This is their like lending protocol example. It was pretty helpful actually when I like using this sort of as a template. I mean, obviously, like the Degenfi protocol has changed significantly from this example, but I literally started from here. And I realized that, like, for example, this one only has one pool. It can only support one type of asset. And I was like, I want to be able to deposit, Bitcoin and borrow Dogecoin or whatever it is. And I wasn't able to do that here. So I had to like figure out how to like adapt this blueprint to my needs. But it was a good like scaffolding of how to like, how does, how did the team think about liquidation? How did the team think about accruing interest expense? How did the team think about recording user data? And then it kind of just adapted over time.
Yeah, that's really helpful to hear how you've thought about this as you're going through.
Yeah, I mean, the difficult part about like this for the purposes of like the portfolio management challenge is that like the team hasn't really done any like examples of what a portfolio management blueprint looks like. So you kind of have to start from scratch. And, the AutoLend was really helpful. Also, the basic flash loan was really helpful from, giving me an idea of what at the basis looks like and how it can be, how you can add complexities to add like different features. So yeah, the what is it? The loan auction. Thinking back, actually, the loan auction, I don't think it's actually viable. Now that I think about it, I think it's actually pretty useless. but I didn't know that, like, back then I was just like, oh, this is kind of cool way of like doing like using transient token, because the idea of the loan auction is that when you, at least in this protocol, like when you take out a loan, you have to deposit collateral, and you get a, let me see here, I can show you. Not only do you get a user SPT, but you also get a loan NFT. So I'm representing loans as NFTs. And the reason why I think representing loans as NFTs is because there will be a situation down the line where, well, not only that you need to have some kind of data in this loan to be contained somewhere, and fungibles just isn't supportive enough to do that. But somewhere down the line, you might want to like securitize the loan, or you might want to sell the loan in some way, some form. And having it as NFTs allows you to do that, because now you can, you know, transfer assets around, right?
Yeah, I was really trying to figure out why your soulbound tokens, like when I started looking at it, I understand now, but why your soulbound tokens had to be soulbound. But obviously, if you have any sort of like credit score or anything, that should not be, your trustworthiness should not be for sale, right? But I was thinking out loud saying, well, you know, if you're borrowing and, you know, for a set period of time or whatever the rules for a loan is, or if you're giving out a loan, you should be able to sell that as an NFT. And I was kind of wondering what the purpose of the loan auction was, because you could just go to like a NFT marketplace, list your loan that hasn't matured yet, you know, and sell it at a discount on a marketplace or something. Like,
Sure. And you think that's like not a good idea?
no, no, I'm saying, I was saying like, I didn't understand why you couldn't just sell make your soulbound token not soulbound and just sell your entire account. But I understand now that it's because of you shouldn't be selling your
oh, right.
credit
Got
rating.
it.
But
Right.
yeah, I'm just talking, like, I'm just excited about what Radix's future holds, because yeah, you're just making a loan NFT that you could, like I said, you just go pop onto an NFT marketplace and list it for sale for whatever you want.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the idea behind loan auctions. I mean, maybe the idea isn't like uh maybe it just needs a little bit maturing. But the way that it's done here, at least, maybe, like what I'm trying to say is that maybe the idea of selling loans, that sounds like something that is a good feature, right? Like you want to sell your loan at a discount because, you know, perhaps you as the loan owner has collateral that you want to free up. You want liquidity to be freed. The person that's buying the loan wants to buy the loan at a discount, or whatever it is, right? Like there's some economic formula that you can like make sure that both sides of the party finds it economically viable. In this case, though, like it doesn't really make sense, because if you want to free up liquidity, like say that you took out a loan, like $1,000 loan, and you have $3,000 in collateral, and like you took that $1,000 and you totally, you know, degened it, lost all that money, and now you can't take your collateral because you need to pay back that loan, and you need to figure out somehow to like free up that collateral. And so the loan auction was sort of my solution to that. Like maybe you can just sell your loan at a discount, and I would have like a transient token where the condition was that you can buy my loan and you can redeem my collateral, but you have to pay me back an X amount. But what if that person can just take a flash loan and pay that loan back, redeem the collateral, convert it to whatever that borrowed money is to pay back the flash loan, and then keep like, you know, a portion of the collateral? Why do they have to sell it, right? Like, so that was like what I realized afterwards, that it wasn't really economical. But
Okay, I see. I was thinking more along the lines of, say you have $1,000 in collateral, and you've
mhm.
taken out you've loaned that $1,000 to a lending platform, but the stipulations of the loan were that you can't, the person borrowing it isn't going to return it for 30 days or something, and you're at day 15, and some opportunities opened up, and you need to free up your loan so that you can have that liquidity.
Mhm.
And in that case, if that loan was represented by an NFT, you could do it, through a loan auction on your own component or platform, or you could go to, like I was saying, an NFT marketplace and be like, hey, look, this, $1,000 loans are in this much APY. I can't pull it out, but I need it right now. So instead,
Mhm.
it's going to be worth $1,500 in 15 more days, but I'll
Right.
I'll take the 1,100 and then run if you want to pay for that right now.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great idea. Yeah, no, there's definitely different ways you can slice this, for sure. Um, so I do think like the basic idea of being able to like, yeah, transfer loans, NFTs and what have you, is just, yeah, in this particular like specific case, like it didn't work out for me, but I'm glad that you're able to like think of other applications for it. Um, Reading through this, so that's pretty awesome. Um, but yeah, otherwise, that's pretty much, I think, it for the most part. I mean, I have like some, credit report system design, like how credit is built. I mean, it's pretty basic. I don't even think, like this is like, I don't think some economist is gonna like take a look at this and be like, you know what, this is a great idea to build credit worthiness in a pseudonymous world. It's just, it's just a simple kind of idea to like show what SBTs can do, really. So um,
Oh man,
uh,
it's awesome. If these examples, if there weren't these challenges and examples, I would not be nearly as, not that I'm familiar with Scrypto, but I would not be where I am now because even I've gone through the dev event so many times now.
mhm,
Those examples, looking back, are so simplistic. They didn't
Yeah,
seem
mhm,
so at first, but
definitely.
there's really no variation in them. There's very few things that are performing checks that you'd need, so often in actual applications.
mhm. So you think like for the purposes of like the Radix team to kind of teach Scrypto to people, they should have more complicated like kind of tutorials and examples. Is that right?
I don't know because I was at the Austin developer event and I was still
Mm-hmm.
in the process of just starting out learning Rust, so I wasn't able to grasp. I got a lot out of it, but at that time
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't able to grasp what was going on in like the board gumball club, and
Sure.
what seemed complex then is actually really simplistic now. I think their approach is really good. Like at first, I didn't understand why they were doing so many presentations or spending so much time on actually explaining. Uh, like Matt's portions of the presentations, he's explaining like how the Radix engine kind of works conceptually and everything. But it's actually really important that they do that. So I think they're on the right path as far as teaching it to people, but having access to people just experimenting on what's even possible is the only way for me to like progress at this point.
Hmm.
Yeah, I also think, I mean, I totally agree. The dev events, they need to be that simple because otherwise people will not be able to follow at all. But then there's a step between missing because when you, I mean, there's so many examples available here on the GitHub, but
Mm-hmm.
it's super difficult to find the ones that really help you. And then if you just look at them and see like, okay, here's like 50 different files, I have no idea where to start with. That makes it a little bit tricky. So I also think that maybe there needs to be some kind of advanced tutorials where they go through those a little bit more complicated examples and just explain why do we have different blueprints here and how do they communicate with each other and what is the dependency and what does it really mean that it's asset oriented and so on.
It's almost like if the competitions required the author of the code to do like an explanation. I mean, it doesn't have to be line by line. It could be just conceptually an explanation of their code, and then maybe even require a video of them, similar to how Clement did walked through the Bored Gumball Club example, of looking at the transaction manifest and kind of describing, okay, this line is taking this from this bucket and moving it here, and like walking through their code. Man, that would be helpful for everyone, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I agree. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at like other challenges as well, submissions, I mean, and some of them I didn't even understand how they work, right? Like they had some documentations, but then like maybe it's because I'm not like savvy enough to understand it. But from a lay person, like it was hard to kind of like follow along what they were doing. So I totally get that.
I could not follow ground finance nearly as easy as yours. And I can't remember if that was Scrypto Nights or no. I think he did.
Yeah, he did Degenfi.
That's right. Yeah. So
Peter Kim's the one that's ground finance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So those were the other two were a lot more difficult for me to follow. I don't know. Maybe I have a feeling that they are experienced in code that I have no idea. I think people that may know like JavaScript or something approach these challenges differently because they have that kind of experience or something. I don't know, but I was able to follow yours a lot easier for some reason.
I appreciate it. I mean, I try to be as like descriptive as I can, and like, yeah, no, I mean, like I went through the same boat as you both did as well. Like when I started out, like, and I like kind of wish that like this person like explained it better in this way. The only like submissions that I saw that I really appreciated was Omar's Radix submission, because I mean, if you take a look, like this whole format was inspired by him. Like, I don't know if you guys have taken a look at the Radix submission, but it's a similar format, and the way that he describes it is pretty descriptive. He even has charts and all this stuff. Yeah. So I like when I'm reading through this, obviously it's like a lot of stuff. But like when you just read through it like chunk by chunk, like you can follow along with how he thinks about things. I mean, and even in his code base itself, like I was like, what does the Radix like blueprint do, and what does liquidity? Hold on, guys, 1 sec, if you don't mind. Do you guys hear that, by the way? Yeah, please.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, I personally did not have enough time to go through all these, so I thought to just look into the Degenfi and I think the ground finance.
Yeah, maybe I'm a slow learner, but because I've seriously been going through those dev events so many times just to make sure I have a solid foundation in what he's doing to start out with. So
yeah, I always do it a little bit different. So I looked up a few things and then I just started. And then I came to a point where I could not continue anymore, so then I went back. And it's more like I do it a little bit like the try and error. But I also feel now that I've missed a lot of things. Yeah, I was not aware that you can have this cross-component calls, for example. So I tried to fix everything via the transaction manifest, which was probably not the best idea, but now it's also a little bit late to change it. But I mean, one thing is this challenge, and we have the deadline on Tuesday. But the other thing is, of course, to just keep learning Scrypto and how to deal with all the different blueprints. So still, I think, I would just get back to those things after my submission and then find out what I have done wrong.
Nelly, I mean that's really honestly like the best way to approach it is just because like you can learn all this stuff like through the dev events and they're super helpful for sure and going through like simple examples, but like the challenge is a really big learning opportunity because that's like I think the hardest part about developing is turning an idea into an implementation and like as you start designing things and cutting code, then you'll come across different design questions that like, oh, is this a good way to do this? Like, is there a good way to do that? And that's when you can really apply what you've learned and you can iterate. And it's like you're finding the process through your own experience. And yeah. But you mentioned earlier, you said like you were stuck somewhere and then you kind of just like couldn't like get past that. Which part was that?
It was mainly I tried. I have two blueprints mainly. I think I should have three, and I'm not sure if I changed that. But one is more or less. I use a special token that I use for incentives more or less. And one component is creating this token and then just gives the user a few of them for creating an account and later on also for just using my platform more or less. And then at some point of time I have some incentives paid back to the user based on the amount of tokens he's owning. And I simply couldn't connect those two blueprints. So what I've done now is that I sent my whole user bucket with this juice token, put it on the worktop, and from there take it to the main component of the platform to just be able to find out how many is in it, and then I return this bucket via the transaction manifest and the worktop back to the user. And I think that's a very stupid thing.
Yeah, it sounds like you're using the transaction manifest to do a cross-component call or something.
Yeah, exactly, because I simply didn't know that there's cross-component calls existing.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like Radix should spend more time teaching about like cross-component calls when they make sense, how to like separate logic and etc. I think I should mention that to Clement. But if you guys have like another like submission that you should want to check out, I think like Omar's submission is probably like super awesome. He's documented this very well. So
I'm definitely gonna go through Radix. I actually didn't do it yet because I had been through Radiswap just from the dev event examples, and I'm like, well, shoot, this makes sense to me that you're instantiating a swap pool. Like, I don't know what else Radix would add to that, but I probably should dive into that one.
Yeah, I mean, the way that Radix is architected is, I mean, I took a lot of inspiration from that because how Omar did Radix was the difference between Radiswap and Radix. I believe Radiswap, can you add multiple pools per chance? I can't remember.
I think Radiswap is just making one pool.
One pool.
Yeah,
right?
So you'd have to, if you had another pool, you'd have to reinstantiate a new Radiswap component, I guess.
Got it. Yeah. So with Radix, you can have multiple pools, and the way he did it was that you can see that there's like a liquidity pool blueprint here, and there's the Radix blueprint. These are really the main two blueprints to take a look at. I know that there's like a few other ones that he has, like the utils, but You can dive in deeper into that, but I think like for like just the big takeaways, these are the two blueprints that's like the most important. So the Radix blueprint is really just similarly to Degenfi, like it's like the main router. So you create pools through this router, new liquidity pool, you deposit liquidity here, you remove liquidity, you swap here, et cetera, et cetera. And if you take a look at the liquidity pool blueprint, it's the same thing. When you make a new liquidity pool, it's actually a function, not a method, because it would instantiate a new component when you do that. You can, where is it? You can deposit or add liquidity here. You can remove liquidity. You can do swaps as well. So like what's the difference between the liquidity pool and the Radix blueprint? The Radix blueprint is simply, again, like a router. You will have multiple liquidity pools that have different pairs. So you'll have like, say, a pool between BTC and Dogecoin. You'll have a pool between XRD and USD, and you'll have multiple instantiations of this liquidity pool. And what Radix does, the blueprint does, is it would, so like, let's say you add liquidity through the Radix. Let's say you have USD and like XRD. It would find that particular pool through this hash map right here. So it contains all the liquidity pools here. You can see this is like, say, USD, this is XRD, and this is the liquidity pool that's associated with those two token pairs, and it would find it that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like it would match it. So it says if a liquidity pool exists, then it will say a pool for this is already exists, adding liquidity directly. If it doesn't exist, then it's going to create a new liquidity pool. So that's how he architected it, and I really like that because in Degenfi, like you'll have multiple lending pool that supports different collaterals and assets and so on and so forth. So it was it was helpful going through it that way.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go through that today. I'm getting more certain that I'm not gonna be able to submit anything by Tuesday, so I'm just gonna keep going and learn as much as possible.
I would honestly, I would probably like if you have like just even like a basic like prototype, like even if it's super janky, I would submit it, man, and like get feedback from Clement. That's like, that there's a lot of value from that,
Yeah, we'll see how far I can get today and tomorrow. This is basically my last few days. I only get very little time during the week after work to put in on this. And man, that's another thing I've really come across is even if I have like an hour or two on the weekdays, it takes me so long to just figure out where I was, and then start back and actually make progress before I have to stop again. Really takes a lot of concentration for me, and longer.
I would do I would do like a to-do list to help you like figure out where you stopped and started. The thing that like consumes a lot of time for me is like figuring out how like the design works. It's that one's tricky because there's just so many questions that pops up in my head.
Yeah, I actually have an Excel sheet where I'm listing out all my functions and what this function is going to actually be doing, and then like what arguments it takes, what is it going to output, and then another column for like what kind of checks I need to perform for that function, just to kind of structure it in my head before I throw it in VS Code.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea. I should take from that. Sometimes I just like YOLO it and just like start writing, and
Well,
we're just like, oh shit. Now I'm like in this I'm like I'm hitting a wall and I don't know what to do.
I have actually just created empty methods. So I've just like thought about, okay, what do I need, and then I've directly put them into the code, but they have not done anything. So they just got the name and the short description and some to-dos maybe to remember what I was going to do with it, and then yeah, well, as I said, so most of them were empty for quite some time, and then I just filled them one by one.
Yeah, that's a great idea too. I did some of that too. Yeah, like I would create like empty methods and have like comments in them saying like, oh yeah, this is where the logic for this is, and etc.
Yeah.
Well, do you guys have anything else that you want me to go over? I can always do another call if you guys want. That
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a lot more code, including now that I understand that Degenfi is the router for everything else. That makes a lot more sense in my head. I was wondering, like, why is this stuff being repeated here? And I don't get it.
yeah.
Like, so now that I know that, I'm going to go back through your entire Degenfi, and I'll likely have questions down the road. But man, I really appreciate your time and walking us through everything. It's answered a ton of questions for me.
Awesome, yeah.
Definitely.
I'm glad. Yeah, you'll notice that I'll be doing, like I did a lot of cross-component calls by simply taking a look at something like this, for example, that user management equals, user management self. I'm putting the address I'm turning the component address of the user manager into an actual component, which is two different things, by the way. I was kind of confused by that at first. So that's like probably like a small tip to make sure you're aware, is that a component address like this is different from a component like this. Just so you know, like you have to turn the component address, this is the component address, and add like the into method to convert it into a component. I didn't realize that for a while, but but yeah, you'll notice a lot of something like that, like right here as well. I'm doing a cross component call. This one I'm doing a cross component call, option lending pool. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely need to check that. I'm also not sure if I'm really able to change it because I also need to submit it tomorrow evening because I will not have time Monday, Tuesday, and I'm also a little bit afraid about this pull request, so I don't want to do it in the last minute. But yeah, I will see. So if it doesn't work out tomorrow, I will just send it in as it is now, and yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Get the feedback from Clement, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I think they're going to be doing like hackathons once a month now. So like, you can take whatever you learned in this hackathon and apply it to the next hackathon. It's going to be probably a little bit different. Like, they might do like, I don't know, like a NFT marketplace or something like that, or a game even. I'm not sure, but like, it's going to be a little bit different, and but there will be a lot of things that will cross over. So
awesome. Yeah, I can't even imagine what else it would be. I bet you NFT marketplace is going to be one of the next couple.
Sure, yeah, sure. All right, guys. If you have anything else, I'm always available. Happy to walk through anything, and I mean, we're all in this together. We're like the early pioneers of Scrypto. So sharing knowledge, sharing experiences, it's super helpful because
Yes.
I mean, this isn't like Solidity or anything like that. Like, it's so new that we have to be able to like share like sort of, I don't want to say the right thing to do per se, but like, a practical way to do things, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much again, man.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. anytime. All right, guys.
All
Take
right.
care.
You too. See ya.
Bye.